Okay. Well, welcome to the December 7th meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. It's a hybrid meeting with Zoom and in person. The details of that are out on the town website. So I'm going to first start with attendance. And I know that Nina and Scott can't make it, so this group of four is it, and of course that means, George, you get to vote again. How exciting. I know. But we have a quorum, which was minimum of 3. So the first things we have on the agenda are meeting minutes from the 2nd and 16th of November.
Mm-hmm.
So
I move to approve the minutes as amended for November 2nd and the minutes as submitted for November 16th.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Ed, Tom, yes.
Aye, yeah.
In favor. Okay, all, it's unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay, the agenda is, we're going to read the findings of fact first. So we're going to take the,
Correct, yeah. I spoke with Bob Metcalf earlier today, and he indicated that he may be running a little bit late and just requested if we could do the findings first.
sure,
Okay, yeah.
and that's no problem. So I guess we'll let Mr. Francis start with item 3, 221001 Kitty's Run, which is a finding of facts for something we approved at the last meeting. So go for it.
So these are the findings of fact, the Kennebunkport Planning Board findings of fact and decision for the application of Phil and Jamie Schumann, Kitty's Run, Kennebunkport, Maine. The following site plan reviews pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on 2 and 16 November 2022 and a public hearing held on 16 November 2022. The Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of fact and conclusions and renders the following decision subject to the conditions enumerated below. The findings of fact are as follows. 1. The applicants are Phil and Jamie Schumann, the applicant, with a mailing address of 58 Beechwood Ave, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. They are in the process of purchasing the property. 2, the property has a street address of Old Cape Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. 3, the property is identified as map 13, block 3, lot 16B on the municipal tax assessor's maps. 4, the property is located in the free enterprise zone with a portion also in the shoreland zone, 75-foot stream buffer. 5, in a letter dated 10 October 2022, the applicant authorized Copy Environmental, LLC, at P.O. Box 266, Hollis Center, Maine, 04042, to act on their behalf in this manner. Mr. Chris Copey of Copey Environmental, LLC, represented the applicant at the planning board meetings. The applicant demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a letter dated 11 October 2022 from Richard and Robin Lovejoy, the current owners of the property, authorizing the applicant to present their plan to split the parcel into 2 separately deeded building lots to the planning board prior to title transfer. A warranty deed recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, Book 16945, pages 176 to 183, on 23 December 2014 was provided to establish the Lovejoys' current ownership of the property. 7, the property comprises 5.04 acres per information provided by the applicant. 8, in an application dated 10 October 2022, the applicant proposes to complete construction of a hammerhead turnaround at the end of the driveway and allow the existing driveway to serve 3 house lots. Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance Section 240-6 14C requires planning board review and approval for driveway serving 3 detached dwellings. 9, the applicant advised the planning board that they're working with the fire chief and the code enforcement office to finalize the exact dimensions and positioning of the hammerhead turnaround to best accommodate fire equipment. 10, in a previous application to the planning board in 2012, The owners received permission to construct the driveway, which includes a stream crossing, to access the two lots envisioned at that time. An as-built plan provided by the applicant on 21 October 2022 shows that the current driveway was built in substantial conformance with a previously approved plan and that it meets Land Use Ordinance 246-14C dimensional requirements for 3 lots. 11, the applicant asked the board to consider removing the condition levied by the previous review in 2012 that prohibited the creation of any accessory apartment. Subsequent to the 2012 review, the town has enacted a permitting process to review all requests for accessory apartments. Since a future request for this property would be subject to that permitting process, the board determined that the previous condition was unnecessary and agreed to remove it. 12, the applicant requested no submission or performance waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. 13, pursuant to the requirements of Article 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance, Guidelines for Decisions, the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings, which would otherwise compel denial. A, the proposed use meets the definition or specific requirements set forth in the Land Use Ordinance and will be in compliance with applicable state or federal law. Finding yes. B, the proposed use will not create fire safety hazards and will provide adequate access to the site or to the buildings on the site for emergency vehicles. Finding yes. C, the proposed exterior lighting will not create hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets and is adequate for the safety of occupants or users of the site and will not damage the value and diminish the usability of adjacent properties. Finding not applicable. D, the provisions for buffers and on-site landscaping provide for adequate protection to neighboring properties from detrimental features of the development. Finding yes. E, the proposed use will not have a significant detrimental effect on the use and peaceful enjoyment of abutting property as a result of noise, vibration, fumes, odor, dust, glare, or other cause. Finding yes. F, the provisions for vehicular loading and unloading and parking and for vehicular and pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets will not create hazards to safety. Finding yes. G, the proposed use will not have a significant detrimental effect on the value of adjacent properties, which could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan. Finding yes. H, the design of the site will not result in significant flood hazards or flood damage and is in conformance with applicable flood hazard protection requirements. Finding yes. I, adequate provision has been made for disposal of wastewater or solid waste and for the prevention of ground or surface water contamination. Finding not applicable. J, adequate provision has been made to control erosion or sedimentation. Finding yes. K, adequate provision has been made to handle stormwater runoff or other drainage problems on the site. Finding not applicable. L, the proposed water supply will meet the demands of the proposed use or for fire protection purposes. Finding not applicable. M, adequate provision has been made for the transportation, storage, and disposal of hazardous substances and materials as defined by state law. Finding not applicable. N, the proposed use will not have an adverse effect on significant scenic vistas or on significant wildlife habitat which could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan. Finding yes. O, the proposed use will not cause unreasonable highway or public road congestion. Finding yes. P, existing off-site ways and traffic facilities can safely and conveniently accommodate the increased traffic generated by the development as far away from the development as the effects of the development can be traced with reasonable accuracy. Finding yes. 14, when a proposed development will be located within the shoreland or resource protection zones, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, Articles 10, the town-wide regulations in Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require that the board makes positive findings based on the information presented that the proposed use, A, will maintain safe and healthful conditions? Finding yes. B, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters? Finding yes. C, will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater? Finding not applicable. D, will not have an adverse impact on the spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat? Finding yes. E, will conserve shore cover and visual, as well as actual points of access to inland and coastal waters? Finding not applicable. F, will protect archaeological and historical resources as designated in the comprehensive plan? Finding not applicable. G, will avoid problems associated with floodplain development in use? Finding not applicable. H, is in conformance with the performance standards set forth in Section 5.6, Erosion and Sedimentation Control of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance? Finding yes. Any negative finding by the board means that the application has been denied. Conclusions. Articles 1010 of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial. As noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision, the site plan application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any, pursuant to Article 10.11 and 10.12E. 1. The applicant, pursuant to 10.12E, shall notify the planning board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. 2. The dimensions and location of the hammerhead turnaround must be finalized and approved by the fire chief and the code enforcement office prior to the issuing of any building permits. 3. The condition levied by the previous planning board review of 2012 that prohibited the creation of any accessory apartment is hereby removed. All other conditions levied by that review remain unchanged. 4. The applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the York County Registry of Deeds before any permits may issue or before any construction activity may commence. 5. The applicant shall comply with all terms and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances. Dated 7 December 2022.
Okay, I'd like to move approval of that finding of facts.
Second.
Okay. In favor?
In favor?
In favor here.
In favor?
In favor.
Okay, they are approved. So now for item number 4, we have item 22102, 37 Pier Road, and the case manager is George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will point out to the members of the board that Berner sent me a couple of additions, which I neglected to send back as approved. I penciled them in, so you'll need to initial on the first page. Thank you, Mr. Code Enforcement Officer. Kennebunkport Planning Board findings of fact and decision. Application of Diane Brassard, pier replacement for 37 Pier Road. The following site plan reviews pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on 2 December 2022 and a public hearing held on 16 November 2022. The Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of fact and conclusions and renders the following decision subject to the conditions enumerated below. Findings of fact are as follows. 1. The owner of record is Diane Brassard with a mailing address of 37 Pier Road, Kennebunkport, Maine 04046. 2. The applicant is permitting with Proc LLC with mailing address of 2793 Winslow's Mill Road, Waldoboro, Maine 04572. 3. In a letter dated 11 February 2022, the owner of record authorized applicant to act as agent in this matter. 4. The property has a street address of 37 Pier, Kennebunkport, Maine 04046. 5. The property is identified as map 30, block 1, lot 10 in the municipal tax assessor's maps. 6. The property is located in the Cape Porpoise East and Shoreland and Resource Protection Zones. 7. On behalf of the owner, the applicant demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a warranty deed for the property recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, Book 14827, page 850, on May 4, 2006. 8. The applicant confirmed that the required MDEP permit by rule for the work has been requested. 9. The property comprises approximately 18,952 square feet per information provided by the applicant and is therefore non-conforming. 10, in an application dated 9 September 22, applicant proposes to rebuild an existing dock and supporting structures. Existing float system and ramps will be retained and reused. 11, applicant requested no submission or performance waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. 12, pursuant to the requirements of Article 10.10.a of the Land Use Ordinance, Guidelines for Decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings which would otherwise compel denial. A, the proposed use meets the definition or specific requirements set forth in the Land Use Ordinance and will be in compliance with applicable state or federal law, finding yes. B, the proposed use will not create fire safety hazards and will provide adequate access to the site or to the buildings on that site for emergency vehicles, finding yes. C, the proposed exterior lighting will not create hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets and is adequate for the safety of occupants or users of the site and will not damage the value and diminish the usability of adjacent properties, finding not applicable. D, the provisions for buffers and on-site landscaping provide for adequate protection to neighboring properties from detrimental features of the development, finding not applicable. E, the proposed use will not have a significant detrimental effect on the use and peaceful enjoyment of abutting property as a result of noise, vibrations, fumes, odor, dust, glare, or other cause, finding yes. F, the provisions for vehicular loading and unloading and parking and for vehicular and pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets will not create hazards to safety, finding not applicable. G, the proposed use will not have a significant detrimental effect on the value of adjacent properties which could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan, finding not applicable. H, the design of the site will not result in significant flood hazards or flood damage and is in conformance with the applicable flood hazard protection requirements, finding yes. I, adequate provision has been made for disposal of wastewater or solid waste and for the prevention of ground or surface water contamination, finding not applicable. J, adequate provision has been made to control erosion or sedimentation, finding yes. K, adequate provision has been made to handle stormwater runoff or other drainage problems on the site, finding not applicable. L, the proposed water supply will meet the demands of the proposed use and for fire protection purposes, finding not applicable. M, adequate provision has been made for the transportation, storage, and disposal of hazardous substances and materials as defined by state law, finding not applicable. N, the proposed use will not have an adverse impact on scenic vistas or on significant wildlife habitat which could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan, finding yes. O, the proposed use will not cause unreasonable highway or public road congestion, finding not applicable. P, existing off-site ways and traffic facilities can safely and conveniently accommodate the increased traffic generated by the development as far away from the development as the effects of the development can be traced with reasonable accuracy, finding not applicable. When a proposed development will be located within the shoreland zone, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, Article 10, the townwide regulations in Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities, and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require that the board makes positive findings based on the information presented that the proposed use, A, will maintain safe and healthful conditions, finding yes. B, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters, finding yes. C, will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater, finding not applicable. D, will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat, finding yes. E, will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland and coastal waters, finding yes. F, will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan, finding not applicable. G, will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use, finding yes. H, is in conformance with the performance standards set forth in Section 5.6, Erosion and Sedimentation Control of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, finding yes. Any negative finding by the board means that the application has been denied. The application is otherwise complete. Conclusions. Article 10.10.a of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial, and as noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision. The site plan application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any, pursuant to Article 10.11 and 10.12.e. 1. The applicant pursuant to 10.12.e shall notify the Planning Board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. 2. The applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the York County Register of Deeds before any permit may be issued, before any construction activity may commence. The applicant shall also provide the town of Kennebunkport a copy of the MDEP permit by rule prior to commencement of any work. 3, the applicant shall comply with all terms and conditions of the town of Kennebunkport ordinances as well as the MDEP approvals. Dated 7 December 2022, Kennebunkport Planning Board.
So I move to approve the finding of facts
Yes, right.
as written.
Second?
Agreed?
Yep. Agreed.
Approve.
Approved.
Okay, so that's approved, and we'll get it signed. And while we're signing, do you have any knowledge of what's happening?
Yes, so, so I spoke with Bob, and, well, unfortunately, there was a pretty significant accident that happened on Route 95, which caused significant traffic backup, which pushed everybody over onto Route 1, and as you can imagine what that did to Route 1. So he said he's about 15 minutes out. He was in Saco, at the time. So certainly up to the board if you all want to. I can give you all a little bit of an update on where things kind of stand with some potential ordinance amendments coming down the pike.
Yeah, that's fine.
Given that we're not having our second meeting in December.
Yeah.
I don't mind waiting.
Well, that's actually, I guess we should probably discuss that
We should probably
too.
discuss that too.
Right.
but,
Sorry, I don't want to presume, but,
Maybe we better talk about it.
yeah.
Okay, so we're initialing. Is there more than one place to initial?
Just on the front page.
Okay. Did you not do it on the second one? Or,
Well, there's two findings.
oh, there's two copies. I see, this is the other one. I got it. I'm sorry.
No worries. Sign the back page.
Yep.
Close to it.
And then you can use my pen. since it was-
Thank you for that.
Okay. And then we give everything back to them. Okay. So, we're nearly finished signing here.
So it's typical for us to think about whether or not we hold the second meeting in December, just due to potential holiday conflicts and travel schedules for folks. So at this time, we've been in touch with those folks who would have potentially been on the agenda for that second meeting in December. The first, the application that you all would have been looking over would have been the preliminary subdivision review for was it Glen at Goose Rocks? Did I get that right?
Oh, yeah.
But they've agreed to be moved to the first meeting in January.
Okay.
So then that would leave, Mr. Metcalf's two applications, so.
We just got the final plan for Woodlawn in the mail.
Correct, yes, but yeah, that
would have
wouldn't,
been January anyway.
that would have been January anyways. Yep, yeah, they would have been on that schedule anyway, so.
So it sounds like we wouldn't be inconveniencing anybody.
I mean, Mr. Metcalf would, yeah, Mr. Metcalf would have to, well, he wouldn't have to agree, we just have to tell him.
That's right,
We'll see you
yeah.
on January 4th, rather than,
That's right, yeah, as
So-
opposed to that second meeting, in December,
so do we need,
All
do we
the
need?
more reason why we hold for him tonight, though.
Yeah, we have to hold for him tonight rather than wait for his first presentation to be January.
I don't think that's unreasonable,
No.
but,
Okay.
So, do we need a motion on that, or just?
no, I
It's
think we
just-
can just hang out for a little bit and,
Okay.
So I'm happy to talk a little bit about some, ordinance amendments that you'll, likely be seeing coming. So we have two likely ones that we're going to be working on, as staff, that we know we have some deadlines coming up. The first is, will be some amendments to the town's floodplain management ordinance. Dare I say that we may have new flood maps, new regulatory flood maps for next June. And so I don't want to jinx myself, but in preparation for that, we'll be preparing, some modifications to the floodplain management ordinance and similarly some parallel language that affects shoreland zoning that would be on a ballot for June. So.
Okay, and would that be in the land use ordinance?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right, yep.
So
So floodplain management ordinance is a separate, is a separate ordinance. It's not embedded in the land use ordinance. It's a standalone, it's part of the code of Kennebunkport, but it's a standalone section. And then because there's some parallel references where we also deal with some definitions around resource protection, we'll be proposing some modifications of some of those designations as well. So, but yeah, so that's one of the items that we'll be bringing, that we'll be working on and bringing forward. And then the next one is, and I'll be discussing this with the Board of Selectmen as well tomorrow evening, is just an update on the bill that was recently passed by the legislature known as LD 2003. And so it's essentially what you have is you have a pretty significant bill that was passed by the legislature that directly affects not only just rate of housing, but zoning densities, within a lot of communities within Maine. And so there were 5 components to the legislation, 3 of which have direct implications on modifications to town ordinances. Those 3 sections consist of regulations surrounding accessory apartments, which for the most part, I would say our ordinance is in pretty good shape with that. There'll be some modifications that we need to do to make it consistent with this act. And that will be the section that we'll be bringing forward, are the regs surrounding ADUs. But the second piece of the law that affects our land use ordinances is density, some density bonuses surrounding affordable housing development. So that's a standard that's set up in the statute that ordinances will have to be modified to address. And then the third piece of it is, what is kind of identified as the 2 to 4 unit increase. And so what that is there's language that supports what is essentially multifamily housing on lots that currently are zoned or allowed for single-family housing. So, and so that one probably has the most nuances and I would say potentially conflicting language that has to get worked out. So this was passed in April. Again, there was a couple of portions that went into effect immediately, but the portions that relate to changes to communities' ordinances goes into effect June or July of next year. So, as you all know, we deal with a pretty strict calendar in terms of getting ordinance amendments drafted, ready, and to the voters. What we realized, along with a number of other communities, is that July 1 is not a realistic date in order to do the analysis, the ordinance analysis, come up with the correct modifications, and really have a good understanding, of what the implications are. And so I've been working with our partners at Southern Maine Planning and Development. One of the requests that we have that we've made to a number of legislators is that One part is simply asking for a year extension, for the legislature to grant an extension to the deadline. But we also know that there are potentially a number of modifications that may show up during this legislative session surrounding this bill. So the ink is dry, but maybe not, on this bill. And I would prefer to know what we have for sure before we, really start getting involved deeply with modifying the ordinance. One of the other pieces with this is that the state is required to develop and go through a rulemaking process for this law. That they have only within the past few months recently have hired staff in order to do that. And so that rulemaking, so we have some interim guidance for communities, but there's still this rulemaking that needs to be done. And so to some degree, we don't really have all the tools necessary to fully understand what the expectations are and how this is to be implemented, how these portions get implemented. So we're waiting for rulemaking to come about, and I can tell you that rulemaking likely is most definitely not going to be available in time for us to do modifications to the ordinance and bring those to the voters for July. It's just not going to be enough time. So what I'm proposing, and I'm just explaining this tomorrow likewise to the selectmen, that our thought process is that we'll craft the amendments for ADUs, because that's a relatively simple piece that we can do. And we'll bring that forward to the voters. But the other pieces, I'm suggesting that we wait until we have all the rulemaking documents available to us before we attempt to author up any other modifications, because we may find that we need some other additional planning assistance to work with us on that. So, and then folks have asked, and there's a memo that's available, with the selectmen's packet, and I can make it available to the planning board as well. Folks asked, well, what happens if we don't change our ordinance to be in compliance with this law? So, and it's a little bit of a tricky answer, because the department at the state that's charged with this portion of law doesn't necessarily have any regulatory oversight over communities in that sense. It's not like DEP when shoreland zoning, where if you don't adopt it, they place it on you, like they can legislatively, DEP can legislatively force a community to have shoreland zoning. That's not the case with this, but what could happen is that if you have an application that comes in for a project or a development that is consistent with the statute, but your ordinance is not consistent, your ordinance could be legally challenged in that sense. So, but that would be a bit of a lengthy process to even get to that type of a ruling, and I think generally speaking, most folks understand that you could go through a 6-month legal process just for a judge to turn around and remand it back to the town anyways. So, so my sense is that most folks, generally speaking, will give communities time to, address these types of things in their ordinance. So that's our hope anyways.
Ask a question?
Sure.
So just suppose no further changes are made in this legislative session, just for the purposes of discussion. I understand that that's unlikely, but what areas of the land use ordinance will be affected for us to come into compliance with the legislation? Sure.
So as it relates to the affordable housing development piece, there's a density bonus, that comes about. So I mean, it could be a subdivision, right? So you could have a subdivision that could come before you that's specifically designated and designed as affordable housing. And so under this legislation, they would be entitled to a density bonus. So what we would need to develop is we would develop, call it a separate performance standard, for that development that would, still go through a subdivision process, but you will then also look at it under the lens of this additional performance standard.
So that would be
So-
mods to the subreg too, probably.
Not necessarily, I mean, because within your subregs, the subregs don't assign density, right? I mean, they just point you back to the land use ordinance for that,
True.
Subregs governs process, and and your design criteria for roads, and open space and things like that. So maybe, there might be some mods to the subregs, but most of that's going to land in the land use ordinance. Now, the 2 to 4 unit piece, that's a much more complicated question to answer. Because in this 2 to 4 unit, development on a residential lot, what we have to look at is that there's different eligibility requirements on whether or not you're in a growth zone, whether or not you have access to sewer and water, whether or not there is a house already existing on the property. So there's a lot of if this, then that, but not this, and maybe that.
But again, where in the land use ordinance would you see those
Sure, so potentially
changes going?
Yeah, and that's the tricky piece. What that could be is that could be in all of the applicable zones. You could
Yeah.
essentially have another, line that
Matrix.
says this type of development gets this kind of density, but it
see.
has to meet this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But it's not as linear as, what you see now, so.
How exhausting is this? I mean, I know that the municipal association was vehemently against this, but how bad is this is it for every zone in town we'd have to do this stuff? Or would some zones, because they're...
Well, some zones, in particular in your rural areas, I suspect, you may not see much of a change at all. If in the rural area it says, well, you could do 2 units, on a single-family home lot, well, we already allow for that. I mean, duplexes are a permitted use in a farm and forest, So in that case, for a 2-unit, in a non-growth area, there would really be no modification at all, and what complicates the matter is that our growth areas don't necessarily, those don't line up with our zoning districts. And all of the physical locations of sewer and water aren't necessarily, so our growth zone has some areas where we don't have sewer and water, but where we anticipate those extensions might be. So, it's not, it doesn't all fit nice and neat together, which is part of the, part of the, I think, confusion with it, and where, and this is where I would be looking, one, for for some of the rulemaking, to give some better detailed guidance, and then second, where we may look for, some additional professional assistance to look at the ordinance with a fresh lens, in terms of what makes the most sense for modifications.
It sounds like there may be quite a bit of outreach to the voters in the town in order to get this understood and accepted. If in fact it's determined by law but needs to be voted in place
Yeah,
by
it-
people that own the land currently, it's going to be
It's a tricky thing
important
because it's
for education, will be
you
important.
shall, but you still have to vote on it, so it's what happens if you don't? I mean, what happens if a community says, we're not going to, we're not going to vote for
We're not
that,
gonna do that.
but it's still in statute,
Yeah, understand.
So, yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why, Tom, when you talked about Maine Municipal having a fair amount of heartburn with it, wasn't necessarily, against the idea of dealing with housing, right? Or providing for, looking at, eliminating some regulatory barriers for affordable housing. It wasn't necessarily against that. It was more this affront to home rule, that communities have. And so if you look at it, I mean, shoreline zoning was a pretty big, pull on home rule. I mean, it's statewide zoning that was imposed on communities, and that was a pretty big deal when that happened. This is similar, I think, in terms of scope, if not maybe more so, for communities. So,
It's not just the perimeter.
yeah, this isn't just the perimeter. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, which goes back to my point, even more so why we need time, to really understand it and make sure that we craft some language that's going to work, and that we can, one that we quite frankly can explain to folks, and to any property owner that wants to take on a project that falls within these laws. So it's a bit of a challenge. It just needs a little bit more time, and that's what we're going to be asking the legislature for. So, but they're also, from what I understand, DECD has a grant program that they've been charged with, to provide some financial assistance for communities for this. But again, like, the grant staff has just been hired. The application process hasn't been established yet, and so we think that'll probably be ready sometime in the spring. And so even more so why additional time is needed. So it's going to be it'll be an interesting one. But also, I mean, for you all just to be able to inform, the planning board, so what does this look like in terms of process? I mean, arguably a 4-unit, a 4-unit condominium building, by statute is a subdivision, and so to that extent, there may need to be some additional standards that are put in to deal with that. State law talks about, a subdivision being, whether it's lots of land or whether it's
Structures.
units within a building, I mean, by statute, these are all subdivisions. And so it may take, some additional work on our part within the subregs to better deal with these, potential buildings. But we have all sorts of questions, is this detached, is it attached, is it, a multi-unit building, or is it, can it be four detached singles on a lot? And, what do we then look for whenever these units go for sale? Do we automatically assume that these are all gonna be condo projects? I mean, as you can imagine, there's a whole slew of questions that hopefully rulemaking will weigh in on, so that there's some consistency amongst communities on how to administer this. So,
Given any thought to, what type of a role Kennebunkport will play in the rulemaking? Or do you see us as being a receiver of the rules only, a passive
Yes.
acceptance? Okay, no participation in the rulemaking.
no, I mean, that's not how, that's not how the statute was written. It's not rulemaking, very similar with, with DEP. I mean, DEP gets charged with the rulemaking portions of shoreline zoning. They don't go out and ask for participation from communities. I will say, when it comes to shoreline zoning, there is the potential for negotiation whenever you're doing mods to the ordinance, to say, well, I know it says this, but we want to do this, and it's consistent with the intent of, and, there's some wiggle room in that, but not so much, not in the crafting of the rules to begin with. At least not that I've been made aware of. My understanding is that this is DECD's charge, and that they have staff that is charged with creating it.
I sense that's the way the law is written and all, but the reality of it is that this is an immature concept at this point, and some flesh is going to be put on these bones,
Right.
and the people that that are sort of where the rubber meets the road, have a vested interest, and they also have the experience to help make this process one that is realizable and maintainable and actually works, rather than is levied and is burdensome and is fought tooth and nail.
Yeah,
So it's just an interesting time in the process,
right,
right at the beginning.
right. Yeah, no, we can debate the ways that it was written, and how it was done and all of that, but.
Sausage making at
Yes.
its finest.
That's right, very much so, but. But yeah, so those are the two pieces that, that we'll be, that we'll be working on, as we move forward, so.
A lot of work.
I'm sure there'll be some other things that pop up along the way,
Absolutely.
so. And we also know we've got some housekeeping for you all to do with the subregs, so those are also on the list.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that, at least those don't have to go through the
that's right.
voters.
Those we don't have to,
They're
yeah,
just,
we just have to hold our own public hearing
Our
for that.
process.
Yep,
So it looks like it was a propane truck that went over on its side.
oh,
I saw that.
It did not explode,
Still down.
but there's a picture of it
yeah,
laying on its side, so it's just, the driver was in the hospital.
yeah.
What do we say, 7 o'clock? If
Yeah,
it doesn't
hopefully.
happen by 7, then we
Yeah.
can do something else.
Yeah, yep, I think that's fair.
Do you want me to just shut your mics off and just go to the screen for a while until they show up?
Sure, yeah,
Yes, please.
yeah,
Hold on.
you want to call for a break?
Tom?
Yeah, that's fine. That's a good idea.
Send out the pizza. All in favor, I second.
Oh, wait, before we really can't.
Outside of this one.
All right. All right, back to work, gentlemen.
So we're back in, Mr. Metcalf has braved the traffic jams and is here.
It wouldn't have been here I'd had, so all of a sudden I'm coming down to get onto the turnpike and all it's over through one.
Not much you can do at that point, besides be glad it wasn't you.
Yeah,
Yes.
you weren't a few minutes earlier.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Which one was on first?
No, Ocean Sound.
Oh, Ocean Sound
Just
first.
want to make sure I start talking about the right project. Let's set it on the chair here, is that accurate, or do you have an easel that you want to set it up?
COVID vaccine check in here. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. We'll just roll forward, okay, property numbers.
I'll also bring it up on the TV.
Well, again, thank you very much for waiting for me to arrive. Paul Metcalf with Mitchell Associates, and to the Ocean Sound subdivision representing Philip and Lisa Vickers. The Vickers purchased the property back in February. And when we were doing some evaluation of the property for them, when they were looking at the site of the house, this wetland finger was on there, and when we went out and looked at it, it really didn't exhibit true wetland characteristics. Had a lot of upland vegetation growing within that. So we hired Longview Partners to go out and assess the wetland conditions out there, determine whether it is or is not. And the report back was it did not meet the wetland criteria. Classified as a wetland, which is three principal criteria: hydrology, soil, and vegetation. So we're here before you. Basically, that is the amendment we're looking for, to remove that designation of wetland from the subdivision itself. So this is the approved plan that was gotten approved by the board. And this is the amended plan, which basically shows where that wetland figure was identified on the original approved plan. And we've added a note on there that was to amend, the amended plan is to remove that wetland condition from the subdivision plan itself. And ironically, not ironically, but when the developer designed the roadway, put the roadway in, the driveway curb cut for this lot goes right into where that wetland finger actually shows on the plan, so.
Which is why it's important to you to,
Exactly.
yeah. Can you, will this be a, what we used to call a red line to the existing plan? Or are you going to replace the plan with a new plan, just from a?
Just, this plan would be recorded as an amendment, which is just for this lot, so it would fall.
Just for that lot?
Just for that lot.
I was looking for the easiest way for me to see, if we just took the old plan and if we had a red pen, what would we do to it?
If we had the old plan,
Yes,
basically,
I see the finger there, yeah.
this shows all the lots.
Yes, but if you look at that lot
Yes.
on this plan, what would you do to make that look like the new proposed plan?
Well, that's why what we're doing here is on the amended plan.
You would just remove that wetland
The
finger.
wetland comes off, what it is, it would be, it's delineated, and then with a leader that goes down, that adds the note, which I'll turn and read it. So it's previously delineated
Okay.
wetland by Woodlawn Alternatives in 2003. Reevaluation by Longview Partners, July 2022. Determined area does not meet wetland criteria. And that was a note that.
So you're keeping the history
Yes.
by putting it on there, but you're amending it with a note. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That
Yeah,
keeps it clean.
that's what I was looking for, is
Sure.
that,
The area's been reviewed,
Correct.
and it's not a wetland, so does the DEP or somebody have to agree with that conclusion?
The only way DEP would get involved in it is if it was a wetland, considered a wetland disturbance, you're going in to disturb it. Other than that, they don't,
So does
won't
any,
require them to reevaluate.
does anybody outside this group have to approve the change in definition? No? Okay.
we have to accept that it's a, certified person you know, with the credentials to
Right.
make this
Yeah.
assessment,
Correct.
that's all. And
That's why,
he's using a known quantity there,
Longview
so,
Partners, yeah.
so,
and that's why we declined
Obviously.
the contract with them to be able to do it.
yeah.
And your customer's okay with this? He's enthusiastic about the change?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
His architect has been basically put on hold until we
Yeah.
resolve this.
Okay.
Because the driveway situation and the wetland impact, if there were wetland impact, then it would require going DEP to address that. So, which would be an amendment to the previously approved wetland that was done when the subdivision was originally approved.
Okay. That's the next step.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you know, we have no,
Yeah,
we have no
I'll find
objections
out.
to, what's been presented. You know, and again, as you know, this is it's a minor modification, to the subdivision plan. You know, the, intent is that you'll have a plan that the board can sign and have a developed set of findings that can get recorded.
Okay. So we have questions, Ed?
No, I don't.
I don't
Well, I
either.
already stuck mine in, I think.
No.
Yes. Yeah, you also stuck yours in.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
George, you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay. Well,
I would move that this is a complete application.
I'll second that, yeah.
all right. So what's, you're in
Yes.
favor, I'm in favor.
In favor?
In favor?
So we have approved the application as complete, which means we have to have a public hearing, and our next meeting we sort of have discussed is January 4th. We're going to skip the 21st of December.
Knowing how that schedule works, even across the river, we canceled it as well, so
Thank you.
Okay.
to make it to the first meeting in January is fine.
Yeah,
I
so,
kind of expected it would probably follow that way, so.
yeah, we'll see you then, and then I guess we can introduce item
We'd have
number.
a public hearing in that meeting, though, is that
We'll have a
correct?
public hearing in that meeting on the 4th of January. Which brings us to a second number.
Tom,
Sorry.
do we want a case manager for this?
Oh, yeah, do I want a
application?
case manager for that? Yeah, I do.
Findings.
Should I volunteer?
Well, you want to volunteer for that one?
I don't
Okay.
mind, whichever one you like.
That's fine. Larry has volunteered for that one.
Thank you, Larry. Pleasure.
I never mentioned case manager, because I'm assuming it's going to get me.
Of course, for the January 4th, I'm a case manager for the reintroducing the Woodland Drive. So
Ah, Woodland Drive.
so I'm going to probably beg off case managing
I noticed it
anything
isn't a
right
butter
now.
on here.
Okay, anyway, we are now on item 2, 221102 Turbot's Creek Preserve, and Mr. Metcalf has another
Thank you.
presentation here.
Well, Metcalf with Mitchell Associates and representing Keenan Saheen, who is the applicant on this. This subdivision goes back a number of years, and what's being requested is to add a parcel that was part of the original acquisition of this lot. This actually was like a 32-acre parcel that one owner divided into two lots. One you've already reviewed as code, part of this parcel. And then when the developer came in to develop Turbot's Creek Preserve, he held this one portion of the site out that had an existing cottage on it, which was part of the overall compound that was here. And I'm not sure exactly why he made the decision to just keep that separate. But its access has always been over what is now Needhawk Lane and then Timberledge Lane that went up to serve that property. Our client, when he purchased the property, also purchased the two front units. Can you speak into the microphone, please? I should know that. He purchased the front two lots, which are units 5 and 6 for the condo association. They have a permanent deed conservation restriction on it, which was what was implied by the original developer of the subdivision. So he owns these two, and then he also owns the boathouse. So when he purchased the Timberledge he purchased these 2 lots and the boathouse. And that provided him with his vested rights to be able to, at some point, come back in and put the timber ledge lot into the Turkish Creek Preserve. And he's been going back and forth on this for the last few years. I'm pulling the trigger on this to make this actually come to fruition. There were some details between some of the members of the association that didn't fully understand all the legal parameters, and he's worked all those out with Bruce Reed, who's his attorney. And so now we're back before the board to actually include the timber ledge lot into the Turkish Creek Preserve subdivision.
Can I interject here? I'm having trouble taking this in because I'm going to ask my typical question of trying to understand what role the board plays in this.
It's an amended subdivision.
It's not, though. Well, maybe you can help me understand. The existing subdivision, how are you changing it?
We're changing it. This is the lot line right here
Yes,
for Turkish Creek Preserve.
yeah,
This is the lot which is
Yeah.
formerly timber ledge.
totally separate from the, from that from the previous subdivision.
It's access for utilities and access and utilities is over Timber Ledge Lane.
You're not changing that?
Yeah.
Not changing
And-
that.
and
It served that
Maybe if you
house.
hold the mic in your hand when you talk,
Is
does it
that,
come out? I thought it came out.
There we go. I just didn't want to break it.
yeah,
So, basically, it has always had its rights to
Yeah,
access
yeah.
from what is now, as I said,
Right.
Nehawk Lane, because it was all one family. that owned it.
Understood.
So, this lot was never incorporated into,
I understand,
so we're now doing is coming back and taking that parcel
yeah.
and adding it into the Turkish Creek Preserve as part of the association.
Well, I have no problem with you incorporating it into the association, but that's not really the planning board's
Yeah,
business.
we don't deal with associations, so.
You-
It
you-
is-
you-
it is a
and-
it's a subdivision.
It is not a subdivision.
This parcel.
That
a
is.
subdivision.
That is.
Right, and this is a separate piece that wants to utilize, that wants to join the HOA.
It's
Why does it have to be added to the
being
subdivision?
incorporated into it because of some of the legal issues and the responsibilities for the current owner of the property. Because he owns both of these lots, which will never be developed because they have conservation easements on it. He has the rights when he purchased this from the developer of the preserve to incorporate that lot back into this subdivision. You know, a lot of
Again, we don't have any problem with him doing that, but I don't think we have a dog in this fight.
Well, for the purposes of having a recorded plan, right, that is, that is an amendment to the subdivision which incorporates this,
I don't see how we can amend a subdivision to add to it. A subdivision by its nature is a division of an existing entity. I don't have a mechanism, the main statute doesn't provide for this. The main statute defines a subdivision as a division of a property or an existing lot into smaller portions. Just because, the people in the adjacent lot want to participate in the, as Tom said, in the HOA, I think that's grand. Or if you want to, make a deed restriction on that property that says you're bound by the same covenants, I think that's okay too. But I don't see that it has anything to do with our subdivision regs, and I'm struggling. What- I mean,
other
what-
than that that the desire is to get a plan that's recorded at the registry of deeds, that's a legally recognized plan of this, of this development, requires that it be reviewed and signed by the planning board. And of course, the only way to do that is to bring that before the board as, as this minor amendment.
Why is it minor? I'm going to have to ask. You're adding a lot.
Well, it's a minor amendment because we're not creating a new lot, right?
You're not
So
subdividing anything.
That's right. Your major,
Yeah, it's not a subdivision.
This is
He's right.
not a subdivision.
This is not a subdivision.
I have a question.
Yes.
If this piece of land is added into an existing subdivision, it then adds to the overall area, acreage, square footage of this subdivision. would that then alter the, you know, the public green space or whatever's called the buffer area in there as a percentage of that land? If you make it big enough, all of a sudden you have to add in more conservation land.
If you were looking at it fresh as a brand new subdivision, you would go through that process, right? You would look at, you would go through and apply that, that 15% piece. We don't have the math here, but I would, if you
Just
combine.
theoretically.
If you combined, I'm pretty sure if you looked at the acreage of the conservation lots and as well as the common open space held, you would meet that.
So they'd be held to all the other standards of.
You'd meet that piece.
Of
Well,
subdivision.
in your regs though, I mean, you're only looking at this particular piece, right? So, the subregs are pretty specific that you don't open the book on the whole subdivision just because it comes, because it comes in front of you. You only look at the piece that's being brought before you specifically.
We are,
But I
That
understand
property-
what your question is.
But that property has a right of way onto.
yeah,
It does,
there's
yep,
no change in that.
that's right.
No one's
Yeah.
proposing to make
Okay.
any changes.
Yeah, there's no
I-
physical changes other than a plan that gets recorded at the
So
registry.
with the right of way, if somebody else is plowing that lane, they could just use that lane plowed as is and never have to join a homeowners association and just kind of drive on it.
Well, it
'cause
sounds
that's
like
right
there's
of
some other legal
Well,
documents involved here.
There are legal documents of the purchase and sale of the property from the original developer,
Yeah.
Mr. Sahim, that allows the incorporation of this lot into the subdivision,
way. Okay.
which it is.
So was that in the original, did the planning board know that was going to happen when they approved the subdivision?
The subdivision is approved before the developer of the subdivision sold the lot. He held that lot.
Okay, but he held that lot and
I'm gonna
did,
back up 25 steps.
yeah,
I did the subdivision plan for the developer. Initially, we talked about putting that into the subdivision. And for one reason or another, which was never explained to us, he decided not to incorporate it. The density calculations for this would allow for 9 lots when you took out the required
Yeah.
elements you had to take out. And only 7 lots were actually approved. And that's what, 7 lots, where they could have been 9. I reran the numbers, the question about the numbers of adding this back in. Adding this in, that's taking out the elements that needed to be taken out at the time this was approved, would allow us for 11.9 lots. So there's more than adequate area, and plus the open space that was preserved originally, which was not part of the density calculations at the time this was done, would exceed what that was.
I'm still stuck. I brought up in front of me the main law on this. It says, what's the definition of subdivision? It's a verb. It's not a noun. And we're talking about this as like it's a noun. We're going to change the subdivision. No, the subdivision means, literally, means the division of a tract or a parcel of land into 3 or more lots within any 5-year period. I know you've read this. I mean, we've all read it. We did that, and it had to come to us for approval because it was more than 3 lots and met all of the criteria, and there it is. Now to go say that that entity is, we're going to go change that by adding a piece onto it, I don't see that there's any of our regulations that apply or any of the main statutes that apply. I don't think you need our approval for that.
Well, I should have brought our attorney, I didn't think this would be an issue. Because the attorney's gone through all of this, as I said, the purchase and sale agreement and the language of that. which
I could just use some help understanding what the planning board is supposed to do here, other than you want us to sign something that to me doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's not that you're, what we're asking for is to amend the plan to the standards that this is now becomes lot 8 of the subdivision.
You want to redo,
Correct. We're redoing,
You know,
amending it by adding additional land.
we come in and say, no, we need to make an adjustment of what we did, I don't know, some number of years ago, and let's pretend we're starting over. You've already done all your homework to say all of the roads meet the criteria and everything, all of the physical characteristics are fine, but we need to capture this piece.
I will tell you from the standpoint, where I have reviewed projects where there's been an approved subdivision, and there's been an abutting parcel
Yeah,
acquired by one of the lots within the subdivision.
what did you do?
And they had to come back, and the planning board had to amend that subdivision plan to incorporate that additional land into the subdivision.
So there's precedent for this.
Not here, I have not here.
Yeah.
It's been before my board in Kennebunk.
But what I think I heard is that the objective is to file an amended, the new subdivision plan with the Registry of Deeds. And the only path to do that is to come through the planning board. I mean, you can't
That's what I'm hearing.
just go to the Registry of Deeds, got to come through. So this is one of the steps required to get the new plan registered.
It's a change to the approved plan. It's
Okay, well,
Right.
seems
Yeah,
straightforward.
you can't take an unsigned subdivision plan to the registry of deeds and get it recorded and
Okay.
and have it, you know,
I still don't
can-
understand what the difference is.
it's not gonna, they're not gonna consider it valid.
Why
No.
bother?
Somebody's asking a question that says, is the planning board okay with this? And, you know, if that's what you're doing, I'm okay with it, but I'd like to have our town attorney say that the planning board is okay with doing this. I don't think we needed to do a big lot of work, but I'd like her, even if she does it through you, Werner, just to tell us that this is the business we need to be in.
So what's going to happen is, so if the town attorney says, okay, then eventually we're going to get a set of plans to sign, which will then be registered at the Registry of
I think
Deeds.
he's
You got
already-
it.
Is that it? Okay.
That's it.
Got it.
Yeah.
A Mylar.
And it
That's
sounds
right.
like we won't have a lot to do
Well,
with the
exactly.
assurances that nothing's changing except the paperwork.
That's all.
Right.
So the finding of facts could be short.
Yeah.
Very short.
Yes.
Isn't it nice we can all learn new things?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got to retain them, and that's the problem I'm having recently.
It's Bob, right?
You know what I mean?
Bob.
Oh, man.
Okay, well.
All right. Maybe I'm certainly interested in learning it, but
Yeah.
I'm scratching my head over this.
I hear you.
So shall I move that the application is complete, subject to the town attorney saying we have to do it?
Can we make that request, Werner? I know we don't do that lightly, and
Well, sure, I mean, you all can make the request, I'll give you all,
it doesn't have to be in writing. I just want her to weigh
Yeah.
in. That-
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
she
but
won't.
provide
Maybe
something.
End of your budget, we can
Can we
use
phone
up.
Amy?
No, so,
Phone a friend? No, what is it?
no,
We can't do
well,
it that way.
no.
Okay.
So, because ultimately, if town council is going to give you an opinion, that you're looking to rely on.
What's her minimum billing?
I'm not going to
it an
discuss.
hour?
I'm not going to discuss the billing pieces here, no.
Okay, well, that's what it's
Because
coming down to, isn't it?
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, and I would say this even just as myself, if you want some type of a professional opinion, then the application and all the associated documents need to be reviewed, really to fully understand what the request is, right? I mean, that's what I would expect, I don't expect a 20-minute conversation to get a blessing on a process,
Can we try that? I don't want to go spend a fortune on this, but I'd like the...
Is there an example of where this has happened before?
Maybe we'll talk to the MMDA or whatever it is.
So
our-
your
our
question
professional.
has to be fairly specific, and
Yeah.
so it's either going to be specific in the context of the actual application, or it's a general question in terms of process. Now, the tricky piece with asking the Maine municipal staff is that Maine municipal staff is not familiar with town of Kennebunkport subdivision regs,
That's
right?
right.
They're going to follow and look at what state statute talks about.
That's what I'd like to do.
And what they're going to say is, well, follow your process, follow
There's
your
nothing
subdivision
in our
regs.
process
Nothing in
that
our
allows
process.
us to add a lot to a subdivision.
So let's go to your,
That I can
let's go
find.
to your subdivision regs.
It's going to prove me a liar here. There it goes. Here we
Well,
go.
now, if it
Reality
was,
is, it's
if
a
it was
major
in-
if that's the case.
if it was,
Oh, my God.
if
No.
it was an easy answer, because I agree with you. I don't think it's, this is not necessarily an easy an easy answer.
Are there any examples in town or nearby we can point to and say, oh, look there, they added on to an existing division, they added to it?
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is, regardless of what the precedent may be, the process is, it has to be signed by the planning board in order to get it registered.
We need a new Mylar.
So the question is, do you need, if the new plan is ever gonna be registered, it's gonna come through here
That's right.
regardless of any precedent.
That's right.
Okay, so,
Well,
And then is it a new subdivision hearing?
I guess, I don't know.
So then
We'll have
it
to
wouldn't
have
be
a-
a minor
though,
amendment
as Tom
to an
said, maybe if the
existing-
findings that go with it basically say the planning board has found that this is a paperwork-only change and that there was no substantive
Yeah,
review required other than understanding that,
I mean, there's no change being proposed in the actual development, it's just a map change, right?
yes.
Yeah, so.
Correct.
I-
And we were given the courtesy of
Yeah.
it coming by us,
Yeah.
but really, there's nothing in our subdivision regs that apply to this change. That's what I'd like to be able to say, and then maybe we can shortcut this. Right. What regulation are we going to call out that we reviewed this against? I think the answer is nada.
It's a process. We're aligning,
Yeah.
we're aligning with the process.
Which is fine. Been there, done that. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah.
See how many NAs we can write at one time?
Oh, no, no.
So,
So your minor revision,
Paperwork
you know, so
error.
what it is, if the revision involves only modifications of the approved plan without the creation of additional lots or dwelling units. So we're talking about, there's no new lot, there's no dividing that's
No,
occurring here, right?
that's absolutely
So
right.
for example, a lot line change, driveway relocation, so those are just a couple of,
Right.
examples.
So
And
so just to be clear, we all just agreed, this is not the addition of a lot
The
that's
cl-
being proposed.
Closest
It
thing
is-
I can tell you is that there's a line change
Yes.
that's occurring.
On the
map change.
drawing.
Right,
Yeah.
which falls under the minor revision definition.
I think
well,
that's.
the line is a map change, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Not changing the house, not changing anything. No,
No.
no trees are
It's a
coming
lot
down.
line.
It's a map change.
It's a line change, yeah.
No physical changes
Okay,
whatsoever.
well,
In that case.
Maybe we can do that.
yeah. So I'd like to move that the application is
So the
complete.
application says that, right?
Yes, and I'll withdraw my request to get Amy involved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Neil.
you.
So I still move the application is
And
I would
will
second that, Larry.
complete, okay.
Okay. Well, you in favor?
Yes, I'm in favor.
I guess.
I'm in
I really
favor.
don't
I think
like
it's
it much,
crazy.
but I'll have to
I'm in
say I'm
favor.
You had to do all of this?
I don't even know what I'm in favor
That's amazing. Wow,
It's awful.
okay.
Okay, so we will have a public hearing on this topic,
Yeah.
and, and
On the 4th
our
of,
resident lawyer will be here.
Ah, okay.
Well, Nina.
Oh, Nina.
a
Yeah,
resident
Nina,
lawyer.
that's right.
Oh, she would have, this was a
And
good night for Nina.
biologist.
She would have liked all
Oh,
of
my
this.
God.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you very much for
I was
staying.
gonna say, she
Allow me to get here.
Would you dare?
anyway, well, given that I'm the case manager on Woodland Drive, and these two just, this is covered, so yeah, I'm gonna assign Nina.
Nina's the case manager.
Nina?
Yeah, we're going to redraw that line to
It's all
include,
legal things.
include Nina.
Oh, boy. Okay, Nina gets this one. Okay.
So she may have to,
She won't
you
skip
may
the
have
next.
discussions
This is what
before the
happens when
public
you're not
hearing,
Yeah,
and it may not hurt to bring your attorney.
yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, it would help.
I'll bring Bruce.
It would help.
Okay, again, thank you very much, and
Thank you.
have a nice holiday.
Okay, and we'll
Glad
see
you made
you
it
on,
safely.
Yes.
see you in January.
So two subdivisions could essentially be merged together, or you could merge on a lot that didn't have a right-of-way but had an existing road somewhere else. I'm trying to figure out what the advantage is.
I don't understand why they're doing it.
What do you
No,
get?
and
You get
I
to
don't think
join a
it
club,
will.
a homeowners
Yeah.
You get to
association.
file an
Must be
amended
worth it
plan
to
with the
somebody.
registry of deeds.
Somebody spent some money.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you could be member of the
Anyway,
homeowner association
I will take
regularly.
a motion here.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, okay.
Second? Is that?
Is that a second? That was a
Second,
yeah.
yes, second, yes.
Okay. I'm in favor.
Agree.
In favor?
We're adjourned.